You don't get to choose the moment you're born. You simply arrive. And tonight, you're not curled up under a cozy blanket with the soft buzz of modern life in the background. No, tonight, you open your eyes to the damp, flickering shadows of the Middle Ages. The smell hits you first, part wood smoke, part damp earth, and something else, something sour and unmistakably human. You're not in a hospital room. There are no monitors beeping, no gentle voice cooing push from a trained midwife. Just a cold rush of air, the groan of timber overhead, and the groan of someone far more familiar. Your mother. She's on the packed dirt floor of a thatched hut, her back arched in pain. Maybe there's a midwife, maybe just a neighbor with rough hands and a terrified look in her eyes. There are no antiseptics, no sterile gloves, just rushes scattered across the floor, some fresh, most not. They crunch beneath hurried footsteps. The fire sputters nearby. Light comes from a single tallow candle, its greasy glow casting long shadows that dance across the low ceiling. You're about to enter the world not with a gentle welcome, but into chaos, struggle, and cold. And here's the cruel irony. This moment of life is one of the most dangerous you'll ever face, because the odds are not in your favor. In fact, they're horrifying. Infant mortality in medieval Europe was astronomical. Up to half of all babies never made it past their first year. And the mothers? Many wouldn't survive the birth either. The agony of labor, the lack of medical intervention, the sheer exposure to infection. It's all stacked against her. You're swaddled tightly. They think it protects your limbs, keeps you warm, keeps you safe. But your bindings are rarely changed, your skin rarely cleaned. Circulation is restricted. Sores form. Diaper? Not quite. You're wrapped in cloth, and when it's soiled, well, sometimes it's rinsed, sometimes it's dried over a fire and used again. The idea of something being clean is different here. The cloth itches. It stinks. And it stays on. If you're lucky, your mother survived. If she did, she'll try to feed you. Breast milk is your first meal, if she can produce it. But she's weak, worn thin by work and labor and blood loss. There are no formula options, no bottles. Wet nurses exist, but only for those who can pay. If your mother can't feed you, if she's sick or dying, well, hunger is your first teacher. There's no cradle, no nursery, no lullaby playlist humming in the background. You're laid on a pallet by the hearth, close to the fire but not too close. Not because it's cozy, because it's survival. The hut is freezing at night. Winters are brutal. Fire is life, but fire is also danger, and houses burn down often. That flickering warmth is both protector and threat. And if you're not crying, someone worries. Because silence, that's often a bad sign. The birth is done. You're here, but no one celebrates loudly. There's no baby shower, no hospital wristband to commemorate your arrival. Just a muttered prayer. Maybe a splash of holy water if the priest can come soon, because original sin must be cleansed. Baptism isn't just a ceremony. It's protection. For your soul, yes, but also a way for your parents to make sure you'll be buried properly if you die tomorrow. There is no time to dwell on the miracle of life. Life here is not a miracle. It's a gamble. So welcome, little one, to a world that does not wait for you. The fire crackles. The candle flickers, and outside, the wind carries a howl of wolves far off in the forest. You are small, fragile, cold, and already your fight has begun. You've made it through the moment of birth. Somehow, against odds that were stacked brutally against you, you've drawn breath, flailed your tiny limbs in the cold air of a damp hut, and begun your life. But don't celebrate just yet. The real challenge begins now. Because in the Middle Ages, infancy wasn't a gentle, protected phase of human development. It was a battlefield. And you, little one, are woefully underprepared. Even before your first memory is formed, you're already in survival mode. The odds are staggering. Up to half, yes, half, of all infants won't live to see their first birthday. If you had siblings, there's a good chance they're buried behind the cottage. Maybe one lived a few weeks. Another survived a year or two before a fever, a cough, or a sudden stop in breath carried them away. You're wrapped tightly in rough cloth, swaddled for safety, they say, but there's no soft cotton, no breathable mesh. Just coarse fabric bound around your tiny body, rarely changed. Diapers? That luxury doesn't exist. You wet yourself and someone may rinse the cloth, or they might just hang it by the fire to dry. The dampness and irritation cling to your skin like a second burning layer. Diaper rash is a mild way to put it. The pain is constant, and your cries blend with the wind outside, mostly ignored. Everyone's crying, after all. If your mother survived childbirth, a massive, if she is exhausted, possibly feverish, possibly bleeding out slowly, but she holds you to her breast, gives you your first nourishment. There are no bottles, no formula. You either feed from her or you don't eat. And even if she wants a nurse, she may not be producing enough milk. Malnutrition, infection, and sheer exhaustion take their toll. If she can't, someone else, a neighbor, an older sibling, or even a stranger, might step in. Or not. Your tiny body is assaulted by the world at every turn. The cold slips through the gaps in the hut's thatched roof and bites at your fingers. Fires are rarely lit just for warmth. Wood is precious. Your bed might be straw. More likely, you're placed on a blanket or a bundle of rags beside your mother. Or you're strapped to her back while she works. You are exposed to every cough, every open sore, every hand that hasn't been washed in months. Not that anyone really washes their hands anyway. Illness isn't rare, it's constant. Coughs and fevers sweep through the village like seasons. Diarrhea kills many before they can walk. There's no understanding of germs or transmission. There are prayers, poultices, and charms. Maybe someone hangs a blessed relic above your cradle. Maybe the village wise woman mutters over your head. Maybe nothing helps. The nights are loud with coughing and quiet with fear. Every whimper brings worry. Every stillness, dread. Yet you grow. Perhaps your limbs stretch. Your cries grow stronger. Maybe your gums begin to ache as teeth push through, and you scream until your throat is raw. Your parents don't call a pediatrician. They don't have one. They might rub herbs on your gums or tie a teething charm around your neck. Or they might simply pray. No one talks about milestones or developmental delays. If you don't sit up, walk, or speak when others do, you're either fine or cursed. There are no diagnoses, only whispers and cross fingers. And if you are born with a visible disability, the odds narrow further. You might be hidden, pitted, or feared. In some villages, you might even be seen as touched by the spirits, a changeling sent in place of a real child. What happens next varies. But let's say you make it to your third or fourth birthday. Your body has endured fevers, filth, and famine. Your eyes are open wide to the harsh light of your world. Your hands are already learning to grasp not toys, but tools, a small broom, a wooden spoon, a chicken's leg. You're not coddled. Childhood is ending almost as soon as it began. You survived the gauntlet of infancy, but the Middle Ages aren't done with you yet. Not even close. You survived the perilous beginning. The dim, smoky hut where you were born, the damp rags that served as diapers, the early fevers and infections. And somehow, against the odds, you've toddled your way into childhood. But don't get too comfortable. This is not a childhood of naps, toys, or lazy afternoons with picture books. No, this is medieval childhood. And it is hungry. Let's begin with your stomach. It rumbles often, sometimes so loudly it startles you, but no one around seems surprised. Hunger is a regular guest in your home, less like an intruder and more like a permanent resident. You'll learn early that food is not a guarantee. It's a hope, a wish whisper with every sunrise. A typical meal, if we can call it that, might consist of coarse bread, gritty from the millstones used to grind the flour, and a thin vegetable base broth, assuming the garden has survived pests and weather. Meat is rare, a luxury reserved for holy days or a neighbor's funeral feast. You chew slowly, not to savor but to stretch the experience. Because once you're done, that's it. There is no second helping. There might not even be a next meal. If you're lucky enough to live near a river or the sea, fish might be on the menu, but don't imagine golden fillets or buttery bites. Think instead a slab of dried herring so salted it must be soaked for hours before it stops tasting like seawater and starts tasting like something. Your tiny fingers work to pick bones out of flesh. You chew slowly, and you keep chewing and chewing. Even when food is available, it's not always pleasant. Gritting the bread wears down your teeth from an early age. Spoilage is a constant threat. There are no refrigerators. You've eaten mold before. You'll eat it again. And water? That clear, crisp, refreshing drink we take for granted? In your medieval world, it's a gamble. Wells can be contaminated. Streams carry runoff from tanneries, latrines, and butcher pits. You might drink something that looks clean and still get sick. That's why ale is more common. Yes, even for children. Weak ale, often brewed at home, is safer than water because the boiling process kills some of the worst bacteria. It also tastes terrible, but you get used to it. You don't complain. No one does. Hunger has a way of quieting even the most spirited voice. You learn to scrape your bowl clean, to eat things you don't like, to never waste. Picky eaters don't exist here. They just fade away. And during the lean seasons, after a bad harvest or a hard winter, the meals stop altogether. You watch your parents tighten their belts, offering you the last spoonful, while their own hands tremble with weakness. You nibble a piece of stale bread and pretend you're full, so your younger sibling can have more. You press your ear to your empty belly at night and try not to cry. Famine isn't just something you hear about. It's something you feel. In your joints, in your breath, in your dreams. When it rains too long and the fields drown, or when frost comes early and kills the sprouts, your whole village suffers. There are no food banks, no grocery stores. The granary is locked, and the Lord may or may not open it for peasants. You see desperation in your neighbor's eyes. You start to understand what survival really means. And yet you play. Children still play. You chase chickens. You build little houses out of sticks. You laugh when someone falls in the mud. Hunger weaves itself into the rhythm of your day, but you adapt, because you must. One day, someone brings back a bruised apple from a nearby orchard. It's tiny, sour, imperfect, but to you it's treasure. You split it 3 ways with your siblings. Juice drips down your fingers. You've never tasted anything so sweet. For a moment, just a moment, the world feels warm and full, and then your stomach growls again. Let's move on. Let's say, somehow, you've made it through infancy. You've dodged dirty hands, bad milk, maybe even an occasional rat bite. Congratulations. You're alive. And now, the real work begins. But before you think of fields to plow or bread to bake, let's talk about something you may have taken for granted in your modern world, cleanliness. Because in medieval times, it was less of a daily habit and more of a luxury, or a gamble. Let's start with something as simple as washing your hands. In your world, perhaps you have a favorite lavender-scented soap or a touchless sink. In this world, you're lucky if there's a bucket of water somewhere that isn't already cloudy with use. And soap? Well, it existed, technically, but it wasn't anything you want near your skin if you could help it. Most soaps were made of rendered animal fat mixed with ash, forming a gritty, harsh block that stung cracked knuckles and left a strange, lingering smell. Not quite clean, not quite dirty, just medieval. And now imagine your body. You work in the fields. You sweat. The sun beats down. Dust clings every inch of you in your tunic, dyed a muddy brown from boiled walnut husks, clings too. Wet, heavy, unwashed. You don't change it. Not today. Not tomorrow. You might wear that same piece of clothing for weeks before it's cleaned, if ever. Washing clothes wasn't as simple as tossing them into a machine and pressing a button. No, it meant hauling water, sometimes from far away, heating it over an open fire, scrubbing by hand with that same animal fat soap, and hanging heavy wool on a line, hoping it would dry before the next rainstorm. If it rained, you just wear it damp, or not at all. Bathing your whole body? That was a whole different ordeal. Public bathhouses did exist, especially in larger towns, a remnant of Roman influence, but their reputation was complicated. Some viewed them as hubs of vice or disease, others as necessities. But most people simply didn't go. The average peasant bathed a few times a year. Maybe in a cold stream if it was summer, or in a wooden tub if you had one. Heated water was rare. Privacy even rarer. And your teeth? You might run your tongue along your own now. Smooth clean, perhaps freshly brushed with mint paste. Back then, a smile often revealed a mouth full of decay. There were no toothbrushes, no fluoride. Sometimes people chewed on sticks or rubbed ashes or crushed herbs on their gums. But more often, they did nothing, and decay was common. The rot set in early. By your 20s, your breath might already carry the scent of infection. Let's drift now to your living quarters. Your hut is shared with your family, and perhaps a few animals. A pig, a couple of chickens, maybe even a goat. It's one room. The floor is dirt. There is no chimney. The smoke from your cooking fire has nowhere to go, so it hovers in the air, clinging to your hair, your clothes, your lungs. Your eyes water as you lie down at night, and you share your blanket with more than just your siblings. Fleas, lice, bed bugs, they're a fact of life. You scratch, you complain, but there's no escaping them. Latrines? If you're lucky, there's one outside, a pit in the ground. If you're not lucky, you go in a chamber pot or a corner of the field. Waste management was more of a hopeful suggestion than a regulated system. In towns, streets were often lined with open sewers. People dumped buckets of waste out of windows, sometimes yelling a warning, sometimes not. The stench in summer could be overwhelming. The flies relentless. And drinking water? Ah, yes. Let's not forget the water. You're thirsty, but where does your water come from? Likely the same river where people wash clothes, bathe, dump waste, and where tanners rinse animal hides. There is no purification, no filtration. You drink what you're given. Sometimes you get sick. Sometimes you don't. But nobody drinks it thinking it's clean. These conditions, unsurprisingly, led to constant illness. Skin infections, eye diseases, parasites. The phrase getting under your skin was more literal than metaphorical. Children frequently had rashes, boils, or mysterious fevers. Adults battled recurring infections, ulcers, chronic coughs. Yet, despite it all, there was very little awareness that cleanliness was connected to health. Disease was thought to come from bad air, miasmas, or from spiritual imbalance. So people worried more about warding off demons than washing their feet. And yet, there's something oddly enduring about it all. People made do. They developed rituals. They scented their clothing with herbs. They sprinkled rushes on the floor to mask odors. Some carried pomanders, small balls filled with spices and flowers, to press against their nose when the smell became unbearable. The more well-off might even line their cloaks with lavender or rosemary. It didn't fix the filth, but it helped. A little. So tonight, as you lay in your clean bed, freshly showered, with sheets laundered in warm water and soft detergent, let your mind drift, just for a moment, to the Middle Ages, to the world of damp rushes, smoky hearths, rough soap, and cold, splashing water from a stream that might hold more than just pebbles. Let that contrast lull you. The modern world, for all its noise and chaos, offers you something rare in medieval times. A sense of ease, of privacy, of personal dignity. Breathe it in and rest easy. You're not in the Middle Ages anymore. You've survived birth. You weathered early childhood. You've learned to eat what's given, obey when told, and work when able. But now, my friend, your body begins to ache in new and unfamiliar ways. And while your spirit may be young and lively, the harsh realities of medieval medicine are about to descend like a fog over your life. You don't know what a germ is. No one around you does. Illness isn't seen as something caused by bacteria or viruses. It's something in the air, perhaps, or it's divine punishment. Maybe it's bad blood or wicked spirits. But whatever the cause, the treatments are rarely helpful and often deadly. Say you develop a fever. Nothing dramatic. Just a headache, a sore throat, perhaps some chills. A modern child might get tucked into bed with ginger tea and a trip to the doctor the next morning. But here, in the Middle Ages, your family's options are limited. They might call on the village healer, who murmurs prayers and burns dried herbs in a clay bowl. Or perhaps your local barber surgeon arrives. Yes, the same man who cuts hair also cuts flesh. And he suggests bloodletting. A few ounces of blood drawn from your arm or perhaps behind your knee. Why? To balance your humors. You don't understand, but you nod. No one dares question. You watch him unwrap his tools, crude, rusty, stained with time and use. A sharp lancet slices your skin. Blood pours freely. Your vision blurs. You feel faint. The cure is working, they say. You're being purified. In truth, you're just getting weaker. Sometimes they use leeches. Yes, slimy little creatures clinging to your skin, drinking from your veins while you lie still, biting your lip to keep from crying. Other times, your urine is examined, held up to the light, sniffed, even tasted, by someone claiming to read your body's inner balance from its color and consistency. And if your illness persists, they may try purging. You're given something to make you vomit or empty your bowels. Perhaps a poultice of mustard and pig fat slapped onto your chest, or a blistering hot iron applied to draw out evil spirits. And there's no anesthesia, no morphine, no antiseptics. Pain is your constant companion, and infection is always just a nick away. A splinter in the wrong place, a tooth gone bad, a scratch from a rusted nail. Any of these could be a death sentence. Let's talk teeth. You wait with a pulsing in your jaw. It hurts when you chew. The pain shoots through your face like fire every time you speak or swallow. It's a toothache, and it's only getting worse. There's no dentist to call, no Novocaine, no porcelain fillings. Just your neighbor who owns a pair of iron pliers and is willing to help. You sit on a stool. Someone holds your shoulders down. The pliers go in. You feel the pressure, the twist, the tear, the sound of enamel cracking and ligaments snapping. It's agony. You scream, not caring who hears. Blood pours from your mouth. The pain does not end. Sometimes it gets worse. Sometimes a broken root left inside festers into an abscess, and then there's nothing to do but wait. Wait and hope it doesn't spread. Hope the swelling in your jaw doesn't crawl up toward your eyes, your brain, because when it does, death follows quickly. And should you survive these daily afflictions, there's always the looming fear of something greater. Plague, smallpox, dysentery. Whole towns vanish in a week. One day you're playing a field. The next your neighbors are coughing blood, bodies piled in carts, and the church bell tolls without end. Doctors, such as they are, wear strange long-nosed masks filled with herbs. They prod at you from behind gloves and goggles, their presence more ominous than reassuring. They might offer a tincture of mercury or a powder made of ground emeralds. They mean well, but their tools are ignorance and guesswork. The idea of getting better isn't a guarantee, it's a miracle. And through it all, you pray, because that's what everyone does. Prayer is often your only hope. You kneel at night beside your straw mat and whisper your pleas into the darkness, hoping the saints are listening, that your suffering means something, that you'll wake up feeling better. But many don't. And in this world, death isn't an end to be feared. It's a neighbor always waiting quietly just outside your door. So when you feel that familiar ache in your stomach or that sudden pounding in your head, you don't think of doctors or medicine. You think of balance, of sin, of spirits. And you hope fervently that this time it's nothing. Because here in the medieval world, even something as small as a cough might be the start of the end. You've made it this far. You're still alive. No small feat, really. And now you're standing on the cusp of something that doesn't feel quite like a reward. Not a celebration, not a milestone, but rather a grim rite of passage. Because in the Middle Ages, there's no real line between childhood and adulthood. It blurs quietly early. And now, somewhere between your 7th and 9th year, you are no longer simply a child. You are a worker. A tiny laborer in a world that has little interest in your dreams, your comfort, or your complaints. You rise before dawn, not because you're eager, but because the day demands it. The air is cold, the floor is colder, and there's no central heating to make the transition easier. The first sounds you hear are likely not birdsong or gentle voices, but perhaps the scraping of a pot, the coughing of an elder, or the bleating of livestock. If you're in a village, The sounds of animals waking up are your alarm clock. If you're in a town, maybe the creak of shutters or the murmur of early footsteps on stone. There's no school for most children like you. No desks, no chalkboards, no gentle encouragements to pursue your passion for drawing or numbers. Instead, you're handed tasks. Small hands are useful. They fit into narrow spaces, lift lighter loads, and are less likely to be missed in the hierarchy of labor. You might be sent to gather firewood, fetch water from a distant well, watch younger siblings, scare birds from the fields, or knead dough with arms that ache long before they grow strong. For the peasant child, work is a necessity, not a punishment. Your family needs every hand. There are mouths to feed and debts to pay, and there is simply no room for idleness. If you're lucky, your workday ends before the stars fully rise. More often, you'll be shuffling back home well after dark, your tunic damp with sweat, and your legs sore from squatting in fields or standing by fires. Perhaps, though, you weren't born to a farmer. Maybe your fate lies with craft and trade. If your parents have a connection or enough resources, you might be apprenticed. Around the age of 7 or 8, you leave your family, not for a boarding school or a summer camp, but for a stranger's home, a master blacksmith, a baker, a weaver. You are now theirs to teach and to use. The apprenticeship sounds noble in theory. You're learning a trade, a skill, a path to self-sufficiency. But in practice, it's often hard, grueling work with little rest and even less kindness. You rise early, clean tools, stoke fires, sweep floors, and watch. Always watch, until one day you're allowed to try. You burn yourself. You bruise. You fail. And the consequences of those failures are not gentle correction, but harsh words, maybe even a beating, because you're not a student here. You're labor with potential. The days blend together. Mondays are no different from Thursdays. Seasons are not measured in school terms or holidays, but in planting and harvest, slaughter and famine. You mark time by the thickness of the mud or the length of the light. Each task you learn, carving a beam, shaping a horseshoe, kneading dough, becomes part of you. There is no certification, no graduation. You simply do the work until the master says you're ready, or until you leave, your body broken before you're truly grown. And even when you do everything right, obey orders, show initiative, never speak out of turn, your path forward is never guaranteed. One poor harvest, and your master might not be able to feed you. A single accusation of theft or laziness could send you packing. And there's always a shadow of illness. One fever, one infected cut, one plague, and it's over. Yet through all this, you don't think of it as cruel. This is simply life. Everyone you know lives this way. There's no alternative to compare it with, no notion that things could be different. You see a neighbor boy cry when his fingers get slammed in the millstone gears, and no one comforts him. You hear a girl laugh once during a break and get slapped for shirking. And so you learn to endure. You don't complain. You don't question. You survive. And that, above all, is your most important skill. Because surviving childhood in the Middle Ages isn't just about food and shelter. It's about learning to accept hardship as normal, to accept silence in the face of pain, to keep your head down and your hands busy. Because adulthood doesn't start at 18 here. It started the moment you could carry a pail, stir a pot, or swing a hammer. And the worst part? You're still just a child. But the world has already decided you don't get to be one. You wait to the sound of bells, not the gentle peal of a church tower calling you to worship, but the harsh clanging that signals something far more dreadful. A trial is about to begin. In a world with no police force as we know it, no concept of forensic science, and no legal protections as basic as presumption of innocence, medieval justice is a spectacle, a terror, and a lesson all at once. Let's say you're accused of stealing a loaf of bread. Maybe you were desperate. Maybe your family hadn't eaten in days. Maybe the village baker caught you slipping the crust into your tunic as his back was turned. Whatever the reason, your fate now lies in the hands of community and God. Because in medieval Europe, God is not just a judge of souls, but the final authority in criminal law too. You're not given a lawyer. There's no judge in robes, no jury of your peers. Instead, You may be subjected to what's known as a trial by ordeal, a brutal method of determining guilt through physical suffering, under the belief that God will protect the innocent. One version is trial by hot iron. You're told to pick up a searing piece of iron and walk 3 paces. Another is trial by boiling water. You plunge your hand into a cauldron to retrieve a stone from the bottom. Either way, your hand is bound and left for 3 days. Then it is unwrapped. If the wound is clean and healing, you're innocent. If it's festering, as it almost certainly will be, in a world where wounds are rarely sterile and hygiene is practically non-existent, you are guilty. There's another favorite, trial by cold water. Your arms and legs are bound, and you're thrown into a pond. If you float, you're guilty. Water, being pure, is rejecting you. If you sink, congratulations, you're innocent. Hopefully someone pulls you out before you drown. The logic is circular, the outcome's horrifying, and the odds never in your favor. But maybe you're lucky. Maybe you're not subjected to an ordeal. Maybe your punishment is more civilized, like branding, a hot iron pressed to your skin to mark you as a thief, or a public flogging, where your back is laid bare in the town square, and each crack of the whip draws blood and cheers. The whole village might turn up to watch. Parents bring children. Vendors sell bread and ale. It's theater, morality lesson, and warning all in one. The line between punishment and entertainment is razor thin. If you're wealthier or higher born, you might instead face fines, which you may or may not be able to pay. If you're dirt poor, that's not an option. Instead, you might be shackled to a pillory, your neck and wrists locked in wooden stocks, left for days under the open sky while townsfolk mock you, spit on you, or throw rotten vegetables, if not worse. And then there are the truly final judgments. If your crime is deemed serious, or if you're simply unlucky enough to have made enemies, you might be executed by hanging, or burning, or beheading. Execution is not carried out quietly. It's an event. People picnic at Gallows Hills. There's laughter, gossip, singing, even gambling. Will the axe fall cleanly? Will the rope snap? And all this doesn't take into account the most terrifying aspect of medieval justice. It's deeply flawed. You can be accused without evidence. You might be punished not for what you did, but for who you angered. Land disputes, jealousy, grudges. All could become death sentences in a system where rumor is truth and pain is proof. Even the church gets in on the action. Accused of heresy? Prepare for the Inquisition. You may not know your accuser. You may be tortured. You may be coerced into confessing sins you never committed. And once that confession is in ink, no matter how it got there, you'll face punishment in this world and the next. It's hard to describe just how fragile your freedom is in this world. A wrong word, a wrong look, a wrong neighbor, and suddenly you're on the wrong end of a red-hot poker. And the worst part? Everyone accepts it. The brutality is normalized. Violence is woven into justice like thread through cloth. So, you keep your head down. You smile when spoken to. You never speak out of turn. Because justice in the Middle Ages isn't about fairness. It's about fear. And fear is everywhere. You wake before the sun. Not because you choose to, but because your body and your obligations demand it. There's no rooster crowing, no gentle rays of morning sunlight through a window pane. No, in your world, the day begins in darkness, and the chill in the air bites at your fingers before you even rise from your straw-filled pallet. You're a serf, born to a land you do not own, sworn to serve a lord whose name you might barely know, let alone speak to. Your family has lived on this land for generations, and unless the world shifts in some extraordinary way, your children will do the same. You are bound to manner by custom, by law, and by a deeply ingrained understanding that this life of toil and obligation is all there is. You have no deed to your cottage, no contract, yet you know its every creak and draft as if it were etched in your bones. The hut is small, just one room, with rough wooden beams overhead, and a dirt floor packed hard from generations of footsteps. You share this space with your family, perhaps a pig or two, chickens if you're lucky, and more lice than you care to count. Your labor is not yours to give. It is owed, several days each week. You must work the domain, the Lord's personal fields. You sow his seeds, harvest his grain, tend his animals. Only then, once his land is cared for, are you allowed to turn your attention to your own meager plot. And when you do, you work just as hard, if not harder, because that's the food you'll actually eat. If the harvest is good, you pay taxes in grain, in eggs, in chickens, in labor. There's a fee to use the Lord's mill, another to use his oven, and still another if your oxen stray into his pasture. You might even owe a tax simply for being married or for having children. Every major event in your life, birth, death, marriage, is an opportunity for the manor to take its share. And yet, this is not slavery. Not quite. You are not bought or sold, but neither are you free. You cannot leave the manor without permission. If you run, you'll be hunted down. If you're caught, you'll be dragged back and punished, possibly whipped, publicly humiliated, maybe even branded. If you escape long enough to settle in a town and live there for a year and a day, you might be granted freedom. But that's a distant dream, one that few dare pursue and fewer still achieve. What little rest you find is often haunted by worry. Will the weather hold? Will the harvest fail? Will illness come and sweep away your family like so many others before you? You've seen it happen. A coughing fit in the spring becomes a grave by summer. But still you endure. You teach your children how to plow, how to bake coarse bread, how to kneel before the Lord's steward and pay what is due. You pass down old stories, superstitions, songs whispered while working the soil. You try to find moments of joy, a feast day, a birth, a wedding, a rare mug of ale shared by the hearth. Hope is quiet in your world, but it flickers. Sometimes it looks like a warm loaf of bread fresh from a communal oven. Sometimes it's the sound of your child laughing despite the mud on their face. Sometimes it's just the sun breaking through the clouds after a long, hard rain. But freedom, social mobility, the ability to decide who you are and what your life will be? No, those are not things you even imagine, let alone expect. You are a serf, born on your Lord's land. You work his land, and you will die on his land. And the world will go on unchanged. You stir before the sun does. The sky is still wrapped in navy hush, and the chill of dawn clinging to your bones. The fire you left smoldering the night before it's died, and with it, any illusion of warmth. You rise from your mat, or perhaps just a folded sack of straw, already aching from the uneven floor beneath you. Your stomach growls, but you silence it with a glance toward the day's tasks. There will be no leisurely breakfast, no moment of peace. You are a woman in medieval Europe, and your work has already begun. Peasant women like you toil beside men in the fields, your skirts muddy by the same earth, your hands callous from the same tools. In planting season, you scatter seed from a worn sack, stooping again and again to press it into the soil with your palm. In harvest, you swing a sickle until your shoulders scream and your fingertips blister. The sun doesn't care who you are. It burns your skin just the same, and the wind cuts without discrimination. No one thanks you for your labor, but without you, there is no bread, no barley, no life. And when the work in the fields is done for the day, or for the hour, you still have your household to maintain. A smoky fire and a hearth that doesn't draw properly. A pot of watery stew that must be stirred. Bread to bake if there's flour, or something to scrounge if there isn't. You must fetch water, likely from a distant well or stream, balancing a heavy bucket against your hip as the cold sloshes against your legs. The children call to you, your own, your sisters, perhaps even a neighbor's. They are hungry, and their needs do not pause for your exhaustion. One cries with a fever, another squabbles over crusts of bread. You soothe them, discipline them, love them, while also reminding yourself to keep a careful eye out for signs of sickness, the sort that can sweep through a household like fire through thatch. Laundry must be done laboriously. Water must be heated over the fire, soap scraped together from fat and ashes, and every garment pounded and scrubbed by hand. Then comes drying, which may take days in the damp air. And when the clothes are finally clean, you face the never-ending task of patching and mending them, your fingers sore from a needle. If your husband is still alive, he may be kind or he may not. Either way, you are his. Your legal identity is tied to his. Your duties are not up for debate. Should he die, the future becomes uncertain. You may be taken in by his kin or return to your father's house. You might remarry quickly, less out of love and more because it is necessary. A man's name provides security. A widow without support is vulnerable in every way. And if you are not a peasant woman, your life is not necessarily easier, only different. In a merchant's home, you might oversee the shop, count coin, or manage goods. In a noble house, you may have servants, but you still face expectations as rigid as any plow furrow. You must be graceful, obedient, fertile, and quiet. Your worth is often measured by the alliances your marriage can make, the sons it can bear, the scandals you avoid. There is little room for softness, little space to be fragile. You bury infants and push through pain. You give birth without aid and return to work within days. You carry water, food, babies, burdens. You bow before the church, before your father, before your husband, and sometimes even your son. Yet, within this grind, you are not without resilience. You pass on songs and stories. You tend gardens that feed more than mouths. They nourish spirit. You trade herbs and knowledge, and midwife your neighbors. You hold together households, patch together lives, and keep traditions burning like hearth embers in the dark. And when you steal a moment to yourself, perhaps while spinning flax or mending seams by candlelight, you might hum a lullaby, your voice barely louder than the crackling wick. For all its weight, your life is still yours, threaded with quiet pride and fierce endurance. But it is hard, unrelentingly hard. You are not romanticized here, not idealized. You are exhausted. You are essential, and you are often forgotten. Tomorrow will be the same. The weather may shift, but the work will not. You will rise again before the dawn, and once more, the world will rely on you to hold it together, even as it gives you so little in return. Sleep now if you can. You'll need your strength. The church is everywhere. From the moment you draw your first shaky breath in that cold, candlelit hut, it watches over you, not in a gentle, comforting way, but in a powerful, omnipresent sort of way. Before your mother even has time to recover from the ordeal of childbirth, a priest is summoned to baptize you. Not next week, not when it's convenient, but immediately. Because what if you die before your soul is cleansed of original sin? This urgency, this fear, is at the heart of life in the Middle Ages. You're not just living day to day. You're constantly preparing for death and what might come after it. The church isn't just your religion. It's your calendar, your law, your education, your science, your comfort, and your terror. It tells you when to feast and when to fast. It tells you when to kneel and when to rise. It tells you who is saved and who is damned. And sometimes it tells you with fire. As you grow, you start to realize how tightly your life is wound around the rituals and rules of the church. If you're lucky enough to attend a service, you won't understand the words. The Mass is in Latin, but you'll feel the rhythm, the chanting, the incense-heavy air, and the flickering of candles against the high, cold stone. It feels like the breath of something ancient and serious and eternal, something that watches and waits. Your days are punctuated by the bells of the monastery or cathedral. Matins before sunrise, vespers at dusk. They mark time better than any clock. And through it all, there's a looming thread of sin. Every action, every thought, every desire carries moral weight. Did you lie to your father? Did you skip confession? Did you covet your neighbor's bread, his wife, his ox? These aren't just minor slip-ups. They're steps toward damnation. And confession isn't just catharsis. It's surveillance. You spill your thoughts into the priest's ear, and in return, you receive a chance to avoid eternal fire. At least for now. Heresy. Even the word feels sharp and dangerous. It means thinking differently. It means questioning. It means punishment. By the time you're old enough to understand these rules, you also understand how quickly they can turn on you. A misplaced comment, a misunderstood scripture, a refusal to follow the crowd. Any of these could earn you a summons from the local inquisitor. The Inquisition, the church's special court for dealing with heresy, doesn't operate like a courtroom today. There are no defense attorneys, no fair trials. Often, you won't even be told what you're accused of or who accused you. You are simply questioned, pressed, pressured, tortured, even Because pain, they say, can purify. Pain can bring truth. A confession extracted under agony isn't just accepted. It's celebrated. It means the soul is saved, even if the body is broken. You've heard stories. Everyone has. Of men burned at the stake while holding crucifixes. Of women chained in dungeons for seeing visions or hearing voices. Of families ruined by the accusation of a single bitter neighbor. You whisper these stories behind closed doors, but never too loudly, and never near the church, because the church hears everything. In a world without widespread literacy, without libraries or newspapers, the church controls what knowledge flows and what ideas are allowed to take root. Books are rare and handwritten. Most are kept behind locked doors in monasteries. The Bible isn't something you read. It's something someone else reads to you, interprets for you, edits for you. To stray from that version of reality is to risk everything. So you hold your tongue. You keep your head down. You cross yourself when you pass a shrine. You drop coins into the alms box. You light candles for the dead. And deep down, you hope that's enough. Enough to protect you from the shadow of sin. Enough to keep your soul out of hell. Because in this world, hell is very, very real. It's not an abstract theological idea. It's a place with fire and demons and chains. You've seen it in church paintings, heard it described in sermons that chill the blood. Hell is waiting, and it wants you. So you pray, you fast, you obey, you give thanks for your suffering. Because suffering, they say, is holy. You do all this. Because from the moment you were born, the church has taught you one thing above all else. This life is temporary. What comes after is forever. And forever is decided here, now, in this cold, smoky, mud-floor existence. So you cling to the rituals, you memorize the prayers, and you hope that God, through the church, will remember your name, even if the world forgets it. You wake early, always early, and prepare for another long day. But today is different. Today, you're leaving home. Not because you want to, because you must. The road is not a smooth, inviting ribbon stretching across the countryside. It is a gouged and rutted trail, sometimes nothing more than a track of crushed grass and wheel-shaped scars through the mud. And the mud is always waiting, slick, sucking, and deep enough to steal your boots if you're not careful. There's no packing list. You bring what you can carry. Maybe a rough sack of bread and cheese. If you're lucky, a woolen cloak if the weather's cold. But there's no luggage. No sturdy boots for the walk. Just your feet, blistered and aching before the day is done. You're setting out on a journey, perhaps to sell goods at a distant market, to seek work in a town you've only heard about, or maybe you're accompanying a pilgrimage, driven by hope, desperation, or penance. Whatever your reason, the road is as much a trial as the destination. The first challenge is simple. Don't get lost. Medieval roads aren't clearly marked. Signs, if they exist at all, are carved into stones long overgrown or buried in ivy. Most travel is guided by memory or word of mouth. Follow the path past the second fork near the big elm, then take the narrow way down toward the stream. Miss one turn, and you could lose a day, or worse. Rain is your enemy. It turns every slope into a slide, every cart path into a quagmire. Wooden wheels shatter in potholes. Axles snap under the strain. If you're traveling with a wagon, breakdowns are not just common, they're expected. You make repairs on the side of the road, with nothing but rudimentary tools and your bare hands. And then there's the night. There are no hotels, no motels, just the open air, and maybe, if fortune smiles, and then with a stable and a loft full of straw. But more often, you sleep in a ditch, under a tree, or press close to your companion for warmth. Every rustling leaf makes you jump. Every owl hoot sounds like warning. Bandits roam these roads, and while you might pass unseen, the fear never does. If you're on foot, your progress is agonizingly slow. 15, maybe 20 miles in a day if you push hard. And then, aching and chilled, you rise and do it again, over and over. And if you're headed on pilgrimage, say, to the shrine of St. James at Santiago de Compostela, your ordeal has only just begun. First, you cross the English Channel, a perilous sea journey. Even on a calm day, the small boats are packed tight. The waves are high. Seasickness is a given. Capsizing is not rare. Once in France, the true test begins. You trek through alien lands with unfamiliar tongues, signs you can't read, customs you don't understand. Mountains loom, formidable, snow-capped and unpaved. The Pyrenees aren't just scenic, they're deadly. One misstep on a narrow pass could send you tumbling into oblivion. There's no GPS, no maps in your pocket. If you're lost, you stay lost, until someone finds you or they don't. Illness is a constant threat. Diarrhea, dysentery, blisters turn septic. You walk through it, or you collapse beside the road and pray for kindness from a stranger. But everyone you meet is facing the same struggle. Kindness is a luxury few can afford. Food is whatever you can find. Bread, mostly stale. Cheese, mostly hard. Water, mostly unsafe. You pray for an inn or a monastery with fresh fare and shelter. But you often make do with what you brought. Old rations, dried meat, and hope. Months may pass before you return. If you return. Some do not. Their bones rest beside the trail, marked by a crude cross or not at all. Their names forgotten. Their footsteps swallowed by time. And still they walked. They walked in hope, in fear, in penance. For duty, for God, for gold. Whatever their reasons, the road shaped them, broke some, hardened others. And you, too, have taken your first steps into this world of endless travel. There is no Uber here. No carriage unless you're rich. Just mud, muscle, and miles. Miles that stretch into seasons until you no longer remember what dry feet feel like or how many leagues you've left behind. In the Middle Ages, every journey is a gamble, and the road always wins. You rise with the sun, not because you're eager or rested, but because the very rhythm of medieval life allows no room for idleness. The moment the sky starts to pale, the hearth must be stoked, the tools gathered, the chores begun. Your cottage, if you're lucky enough to have one, offers only the most basic shelter, a single soot-darkened room with a low, sloping roof and walls that seem to lean in with the weight of age and dampness. There's no real insulation, no chimney to guide the smoke out. Instead, it curls around the rafters, stinging your eyes and clinging to your clothes. The air inside is heavy, thick with the mingled scent of unwashed bodies, old straw bedding, and the faint ammonia tang from the corner where the animals sleep. Yes, animals. Chickens peck the dirt floor. A pig may grunt softly in the gloom. They are not pets. They are food, or wealth. But for now, they live with you, because there's nowhere else for them to go. Their body heat, along with yours, is part of your winter heating strategy. It's not cozy. It's survival. There's little light. Only what leaks through the door or the gaps in the walls. Glass windows? Unthinkable. Those are the domain of churches and castles, shimmering like fairy magic in a world made mostly of wood and mud. You work by the faint glow of the fire or the pale wash of day. At night, you grope your way through darkness, guided only by instinct and memory. And your bed? It's a sack of straw, or perhaps a rough wooden board with a thin mat on top. You might share it with your spouse, your children, or even a sibling. Privacy is a modern fantasy. Here, everyone sees, hears, and smells everything. Every cough, every snore, every whispered worry in the night. In summer, the heat inside becomes stifling. In winter, the cold bites through your tunic and settles in your bones. Rain drums on the thatched roof, leaking through in places, turning dirt floors to mud. You push your straw bed to the driest corner and try not to think about what might be crawling beneath it. There are no closets, no cupboards. A few hooks on the wall might hold your only change of clothing, if you're fortunate enough to have one. Pots and tools are hung where they won't be in the way. What little you own is on display, not for vanity, but because there's simply nowhere else to put it. And still, for all its hardship, your home is the center of your world. It's where you're born, where you'll likely die. It's where meals are cooked, children are raised, prayers are whispered, and generations come and go without ever leaving its low threshold. When the weather is fair, you spend as much time outdoors as possible. Not because you're fond of the breeze or enchanted by birdsong, but because the air out there is simply cleaner, clearer. You chop wood, haul water, tend the garden, patch the roof, scrub your clothes by hand, soak them in lye, and hang them on a line if the sun cooperates. Sometimes you sit by the fire and stare into the embers, not thinking about the future, because the future is uncertain, but simply trying to rest your weary body after a day spent bending, lifting, and trudging. When visitors come, they bring news, or rumors at least. Perhaps a neighbor has taken ill. Perhaps a new tax is being whispered about. Perhaps there's been a theft at the manor. The arrival of a guest means fresh conversation, but it also means finding room for another body in an already crowded space. You smile. You make room. That's what people do. Hospitality is sacred, even when it's strange or already meager resources. So when you picture home, remember, it's not about comfort. It's about containment, shelter, maybe even pride in a small, stubborn way. The walls may be crooked, the air stale, the straw mattress scratchy. But it is yours. It is where your family sleeps, where your mother stirred stew, where your grandfather once knelt in prayer. It is smoke and shadow and struggle. But it is also history, a heartbeat in the long, dark rhythm of the Middle Ages. And tomorrow, when the sun returns, you'll rise again, because there is always more to do. You wake up early, as always, though wake up might be too generous a phrase. Sleep is rarely deep or peaceful in your crowded, smoky cottage. Perhaps a pig snorted too loudly beside you, or a neighbor's baby cried through the night. But now, the sun's pale light is bleeding through the gaps in the shutters, and your day begins. Not with stretch or yawn, but with motion. Always motion. You don't think about leisure time, because such a concept doesn't quite exist for someone like you. Your calendar is set by the land, the planting season, the harvest, days of fasting, feast days. Whether it's the peak of summer or the frozen breath of winter, you rise to work. Because if you don't eat. But in those rare scraps of the day when the work slows or the holy calendar grants you rest, how you spend your time. Forget Netflix. Forget a cozy novel or headphones playing your favorite song. Entertainment in the Middle Ages is loud, communal, often crude, and never far from risk. For peasants like you, it's less about relaxing and more about breaking the monotony of survival. On a fair day, maybe your village hosts a rough-and-tumble game of folk football. Don't picture soccer. This isn't 11 players versus 11. It's your entire village versus the one across the field. There are no real rules. The ball might be a stitched pig's bladder. The goalposts? Sometimes miles apart. A muddy scrum forms, bodies crashing into each other, limbs tangling, laughter and cursing flying through the air. Someone breaks a finger. Another cracks a rib. You come home bruised, exhausted, and oddly proud. Wrestling matches are popular. Two contestants circle in the dirt, cheered on by everyone from toddlers to toothless grandfathers. If you win, maybe you'll be rewarded with a tankard of ale. If you lose, well, you better not lose too badly. No one want a black eye when there's a fence to mend tomorrow. Speaking of ale, that's another form of recreation. Taverns, small though they may be, become the social heart of any settlement. You cram in shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors, sipping lukewarm brew from a shared mug. Someone pulls out dice, and soon your hard-earned coin, if you have any, is at stake. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. The laughter, the stories, the shouting, it's life, louder than the fields and fires. And then there are the darker diversions. Bear baiting, cockfights, even dog fights. The villagers form a ring, blood and fur flying at the center. You might be shocked now, but then it was normal. Perhaps not kind, but routine. Entertainment had teeth. If you're a child, you do get to play. Sometimes. You chase each other through muddy lanes. You pretend to be knights or dragons. You toss pebbles or bones in a game of luck. But always, play is short-lived. There's wood to gather, animals to tend, a sibling to rock. Childhood is not a protected realm. It's a brief prelude to labor. For nobles, leisure is different. The halls of a lord's manor might echo with music, a lute, a harp, a human voice. There are minstrels and jesters, and knights playing chess. Noble women embroider by candlelight, whispering court gossip. There's dancing, wine, poetry readings. But this is not your world. You'll never be invited. And yet, even for the rich, amusement has its edges. Dueling for honor, boar hunts, falconry. Yes, they're pastimes, but they're dangerous, too. A slipped hand, a spooked horse, a gored thigh, and death waits for anyone, no matter their status. Perhaps the most shared entertainment of all? Religion. Holy days bring feasts, parades, music, communal meals. The mystery plays are performed in the village square, enacting scenes from scripture with costumes and drama. You stand in the crowd wide-eyed as angels and devils are acted out by your neighbors. You laugh, you weep, you remember. Leisure, in this time, is not separate from survival. It's entangled with pain and joy, exhaustion and fellowship. It is noisy, dirty, intense, and never guaranteed. So, as you lie back tonight and listen to the hush of modern quiet, the hum of electricity, the ticking of clock, remember that once, your idea of rest might have been standing in a muddy field, shouting yourself hoarse while two villages collided over a pigskin. And honestly, you'd have called it a good day. You'd think by now, after surviving childbirth in a dirt hut, dodging plagues and priests, and enduring hunger, filth, and heartbreak, you might at least earn a little rest, some peace, a moment to exhale. But no, in the Middle Ages, even your thoughts aren't entirely yours. Even your fears must be filtered through a lens that sees demons lurking in the shadows and angels tallying your every step. In this world, truth isn't carved in stone. It's whispered, sung, misheard, and reshaped across valleys and generations. You live in a society where stories and news travel on foot in the mouths of merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and priests. And every telling bends a truth just a little more, like a ripple stretching across water. A simple skirmish across the sea might arrive in your ears as a tale of dragons, sorcerers, and divine intervention. Your worldview is a patchwork quilt, stitched from half-remembered myths, family superstitions, and sermons delivered in Latin, none of which you actually understand. Even if you could read, which, statistically, you probably can't, there aren't many books, and those that exist are handwritten, precious, and often chained to the walls of monasteries. You don't just walk into a library. There is no library. Your access to knowledge is whatever you're told by someone who sounds like they know what they're talking about, and yet you still try to make sense of the world. You look up at the stars, not with a telescope, but with your naked eyes. You don't see galaxies or nebulae. You see holes in the floor of heaven, tiny pinpricks where divine light leaks through. You navigate life by the cycles of the moon, the whispers of the wind, the way your grandmother wins from the fire cracked just so. Every cough, every failed crop, every dream that left you sweating the night, it all meant something. Because superstition fills a vacuum where science hasn't yet arrived. Your tools for understanding suffering are prayer, ritual, and guesswork. That headache? Maybe it's too much bile. Or maybe it's a punishment. That child born with a withered limb could be a changeling left by fairies. That cow who stopped giving milk must be cursed, or the victim of a wandering witch's glare. Every misfortune has a cause, and that cause is never random. It's personal, it's spiritual, it's judgment. So you live cautiously. You carry charms, little pouches of dried herbs blessed by a wandering friar, a nail from the village chapel's roof, a stone from the river that only flows during Holy Week. You cross yourself at every creak in the floorboards. You whisper prayers when you hear owls at night. You hang garlic above the doorway, not for flavor, but for protection, because you don't just fear hunger and disease. You fear what causes them, what provokes them. And the danger isn't just external. It's you, too. Your own thoughts, your doubts, your questions, they could betray you. You might wonder why the harvest failed, or why the plague struck your cousin and not your neighbor. But you mustn't ask aloud, because questioning the divine order might mark you as a heretic. And as you've already seen, heretics don't fare well in this world. So you tread softly, especially with your curiosity. You learn to survive not just by toiling the land, but by disciplining your mind. You learn when to stay silent, when to nod, when to pretend you didn't see what you saw. You become fluent in caution, in discretion, in fear. And still, something lingers. Maybe it's in the quiet moments, those rare pauses between labor and sleep, when you stare into fire and wonder if the world is really as small and haunted as they say. Maybe, just maybe, you dream of other places, of other truths. But dreams, too, must be hidden, because even hope can be dangerous, especially when no one else shares it. You're still standing, perhaps stooped, perhaps slower, but still breathing, still waking each day beneath a thatched roof to the distant clang of blacksmith or the morning call of crows. If you made it this far, you are among the rarest of the rare. Old age in the medieval world is not a peaceful, golden twilight. It is, more often, the gradual diminishment marked by pain, by loss, and by a strange kind of invisibility. Your body aches. Your knees crackle when you rise. Your fingers, once nimble in the field or at the loom, now fumble at the simplest tasks. There is no word for retirement. You simply do less because you can do no more. Perhaps you live with your children, if they've survived. Or perhaps you're alone, a widow or widower, living on the grace or the reluctance of extended family. There are no pensions, no elderly stipends, no village healthcare clinic. What you eat depends on what others can spare. And what others can spare depends on harvest, on weather, on luck. If the winter is harsh, you may be the first to go hungry. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. You're not as useful now, and food is never in excess. Still, you possess something precious, time, memory, perhaps even wisdom. In some villages, the elderly are respected. Their stories are valued. Their opinions sought, especially in matters of land, of lineage, of the rhythms of planting and weather. You might be asked to recall the last time the river froze, or when the last great storm flattened the barley fields. Your words are oral history. You are the archive. But that respect is not guaranteed. In harder places, in harder times, an old person is simply another mouth to feed. And as you sit by the fire or huddle beneath coarse wool on a bed of straw, you may sense a quiet impatience. Your daughter rising a little more briskly from the bench when you ask for water. Your grandson forgetting your name. The feeling that you've slipped from necessity into burden. Your appearance, too, tells the story of your years. There is no soft lighting, no face cream, no eye surgery. The sun has darkened your skin. The cold has roughened it. Your teeth are mostly gone, rotted or pulled, leaving your jaw sunken. Your back is bent. A mirror, if you even own one, only reflects a slow erosion of time. And yet, there's something noble in that erosion. Your life has been a test of endurance. You weathered famine, plague, war, childbirth, loss. You've seen children born and buried. You watch seasons cycle through again and again. You've seen villages disappear and new ones grow. You've seen the old ways fade, perhaps the old religion, old gods, or old customs, and new ones replace them. Maybe you even remember when your village got its first church bell, or the first cart with iron wheels, or the strange foreigner who passed through with a book full of stories. The landscape of your mind is vast and rugged. Even if your world has always been small, just a few miles in each direction, you've lived through tectonic shifts in ways that few now can imagine. And so, as night falls on your final years, you begin to look beyond. You think of the soul, of judgment, of what lies beyond the veil. The church has always told you what to expect: heaven, hell, purgatory. But deep down, perhaps there's uncertainty. A soft question you never dared voice. What if it's nothing? What if it's something else entirely? You whisper more prayers now. You clutch your wooden rosary tighter. Maybe the priest visits you more often. Maybe you prepare a will of sorts, though you own little more than your cloak, your comb, and a few tokens wrapped in cloth. Death comes not as a stranger, but as a familiar. You've seen it walk your village path 1,000 times. This time, it simply stops at your door. And perhaps, just perhaps, in those final moments, whether surrounded by family or with only the fire for company, you feel something unexpected, relief, a gentle loosening, the end of pain, the end of hunger, the end of toil. You close your eyes and the world of the Middle Ages, so often romanticized, so often misunderstood, finally lets you go. You are free,